February 12, 1944. Somewhere beneath the icy waters of the North Atlantic, a British submarine, HMS Trenchant, patrolled the deep alone. Its orders were simple: watch, wait, and strike when needed. But in war, even the sea has its own plans. Decades later, when divers finally reached the wreck, they didn't just find steel and ruin. They found something else, something fragile yet untouched by time, a coil of rope, salt-stiffened, frayed, still tied in the pattern used by submarine engineers. It was recovered carefully, placed behind glass at the Portsmouth Naval Museum. Today, visitors walk past it without a second glance. They don't see the fingerprints that once pressed into its fibers. They don't hear the voices of the men who once held it, desperate, freezing, alive. But that rope, it was their lifeline. For 39 hours in the black belly of the ocean, it kept a handful of men from drifting apart and from giving up. This is their story, the story of the rope, and the men who refused to let go. Inside the belly of HMS Trenchant, the world was narrow. Steel walls, stale air, and the constant pulse of the engine that never slept. 50 men lived in a space smaller than a single family home. They ate together, breathed together, and dreamed in shifts, one man's bunk becoming another's as the watch changed. Coffee was their comfort, letters from home their sanity, the smell of oil and metal their reality. Among them was Chief Engineer Arthur Purring. 32 years old, quiet, methodical. He'd been at sea since he was 17. His men called him Rope, a nickname from his early training days, when he repaired a snapped line with such precision it saved a damaged lifeboat from drifting away. He smiled when they called him that, but he never forgot what the rope had meant. The Trenchant was part of Britain's silent fleet, submarines that patrolled the Arctic and Atlantic routes, hunting German U-boats and protecting convoys. They were unseen, uncelebrated, shadows in a war of giants. And yet for those who served beneath the waves, the sea was both enemy and home. Days blurred into nights. Every sound could mean survival or disaster. They laughed when they could. They argued about football, home, and the taste of canned beans. They were boys made old by war, bound not by orders but by trust. And though the ocean pressed on them with the weight of 1,000 tons, they held steady. Silent running, two words that froze every breath on board. Engines off, voices hushed. Only the sound of the sea and the faint creak of the hull remained. Somewhere above, enemy sonar swept the waters. Each man waited for the telltale ping, that sound that meant they'd been found. That night Arthur noticed something, a small leak near one of the ballast valves. Nothing dangerous, not yet. He made a note to fix it once they surfaced. But the sea keeps its own schedule. The ocean was calm that night, deceptively calm. Depth, 180 feet. Temperature, freezing. Pressure, crushing. For most men aboard HMS Trenchant, it was another routine patrol, another silent night below the waves. But for Arthur Purring, the quiet hum of the engine wasn't comfort. It was a warning. That leak he'd seen earlier, it hadn't stopped. Now it was more than a drip. It was steady, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. In the noise of the engine room, no one else noticed, but Arthur did. He tightened the seal once, twice. Nothing changed. Then came a faint hiss, the kind of sound no sailor ever wants to hear underwater: steam, pressure escaping. He radioed the bridge. "Captain, minor pressure issue in aft ballast tank, requesting inspection." The captain, under orders to maintain silence, replied with only 3 words: "Log it. Continue patrol." Orders were orders. Silence meant survival. Arthur obeyed. But down there, silence can be fatal. Hours passed. The men slept, played cards, told stories. Above them, the ocean pressed harder. Then, at 3:09 hours, it happened. The valve gave way. A jet of freezing seawater burst through the compartment wall, a knife of liquid ice slicing through steel and air. Within seconds, the aft compartments began to flood. Panic spread faster than the flood. Men grabbed for valves, sealed bulkheads, shouted names through the roar of rushing water. Arthur's team, engineers, machinists, electricians, were closest to the breach. He tried to seal the hatch, but the force of the water was monstrous. When it slammed shut, 26 men were trapped on the other side. In less than 2 minutes, the aft compartments were lost. The captain ordered emergency ascent, but the controls were jammed, ballast tanks failing. The trenchant began to sink, slowly, relentlessly. Depth gauges spun wildly. Pressure alarms screamed. 220 feet, 250 feet, 300, then nothing. The sea had swallowed them whole, and for the first time in its service, HMS Trenchant no longer answered the call. In the frozen dark of the Atlantic, a few survivors gathered in what remained of the forward compartments. Alive but trapped. Among them was Arthur Purring. His hands trembled from the cold. His heart pounded with the weight of 26 ghosts. And as the lights flickered out one by one, he reached for a length of rope. Hours since impact, 047. When the world ended for them, it didn't end in fire. It ended in silence. The engines were gone. The lights, gone. The hum of the ship, gone. Only the slow, rhythmic groaning of metal under the ocean's weight remained. Inside the forward compartment, 15 men were still alive. Some injured, all terrified. Their only source of light, a few flickering emergency lamps and the faint glow from phosphorescent dials. Arthur Purring checked the bulkhead. The seals were holding, for now. They had air. They had rations for maybe 2 days, but the water was rising, inch by inch, silent as death. In the dark, Arthur found it, a length of mooring rope used to secure tool crates. It was old, frayed at the ends, but strong enough to hold weight. He looked at the men, shivering, whispering, one crying softly into his sleeve. And in that moment, an idea came to him. "We'll tie ourselves together," he said quietly. "One line, one chain, no one drifts. If one moves, we all move." Some stared in disbelief. Others nodded, too cold to argue. He tied the rope around his own waist first, then passed it along. In that gesture, so small, so human, order returned to chaos, a line in the dark, a promise not to let go. Hours passed, the air grew stale, breath turned heavy, voices cracked. They sang old songs to keep their minds alive, whispered verses from memory. "We'll meet again," one man hummed, too softly for the others to stop him. At 6 o'clock hours, a new sound reached them. Faint, distant, impossible, 3 sharp knocks. Someone above was signaling. The surface had found them. More signals exchanged through the hull. "Are you alive?" "Yes." "Rescue coming," simple words, but to them it was salvation. They didn't know how long it would take, or if the sea would hold that long. But Arthur told them, "We've got 39 hours of fight left in us. We'll make them count." They couldn't see the dawn, but they felt it. Somewhere above the waves, light still existed. And as long as one end of that rope stayed tied, so did they. On the surface, the sea was merciless. Each wave rose like a mountain and fell like judgment. But the men of HMS Resolute were not giving up. Somewhere beneath them, their brothers were alive and waiting. Lieutenant Commander Harold Briggs, head of the rescue, had one order: "We find them, we fix the line, we bring them home." But the sonar readings were chaotic. Debris, echoes, distortions. Every minute wasted meant air slipping away below. Below, Arthur counted time by drips, each one. Another second of life lost to the sea. They rationed air, moved slowly, spoke only when needed. Yet even in silence, men dreamed. The rope was more than a tether. It was a lifeline of will. Through it, they felt each other's movement, the faint tug that said, "I'm still here." At 1340 hours, sonar found a shape. Long, angled, motionless. The trenchant, resting 310 feet down, wedged into the silt. Too deep for divers, too shallow for surrender. Briggs ordered a bell chamber lowered. A crude rescue sphere, barely tested. If it cracked under pressure, it would take the rescuers with it. Still, men volunteered before he could even finish his sentence. 20 hours. Some had fainted. One was gone, quietly in his sleep. Arthur tied his rope around the fallen man's wrist. He whispered, "No one drifts." Above, Briggs' divers sent down coded taps, a rhythm through the hull, 3 knocks for hold on, 2 for rescue in progress. Through steel, through water, through darkness, two worlds spoke in code. Hope transmitted through sound. The rescue bell reached the hull at 29 hours. The divers worked by touch, not sight, feeling for hatches, cracks, and joints. They found the forward compartment intact, Arthur's compartment. They began drilling a small hole to pass air down, but the pressure difference was unforgiving. One wrong turn and the entire hull could implode. On the 35th hour, a hiss filled the compartment below. Air, fresh air. They cheered weakly, their voices hoarse, their eyes wide. For the first time, the smell of life returned to the sea. By the 39th hour, rescue cables were ready. The divers secured the escape chamber to the hatch. One by one, the men were lifted toward daylight, some unconscious, some too weak to climb. Arthur was the last. He looked at it one last time, the rope that had kept them together, frayed, salt-stiffened, a thread between life and oblivion. He wrapped it around his wrist and stepped into the chamber. The sea released them slowly, unwilling to let go. But when they broke the surface, a cheer rose that no wave could silence. When Arthur Purring woke, he didn't feel relief. He felt the weight of silence, the kind that follows after screaming stops. The doctors said he'd been unconscious for 20 hours. He asked only one question. How many didn't make it? 11 survived. 26 never saw the surface again. The sea had taken them, quick, cold, and without warning. The Admiralty called it a miracle of discipline. Newspapers called it a testament to courage. But Arthur called it something else, a debt. Inside the cloth, the rope, stiff, dark, smelling of iron and seawater. He'd kept it since the day they pulled him from the ocean. He sat at the edge of the dock and ran the rope through his fingers. Every knot, every fray. A name, a face. It wasn't just a piece of cordage anymore. It was proof that in the darkest place imaginable, men still chose to hold on to one another. He didn't talk much about it afterward. When asked how he survived, he'd only say, "We stayed tied together. That was all." 3 years later, when the memorial was unveiled, Arthur stood among the crowd. Older, slower, still carrying that rope coiled at his side. He waited until the speeches were done. Then, when no one was watching, he placed the rope at the base of the stone, right under the engraved name, HMS Trenchant. He didn't say a word. He just touched the rope one last time and walked away. Decades passed. The sea forgot. But when divers rediscovered the wreck in 1978, they found something unexpected. In the forward compartment near the corroded bulkhead, a small, preserved coil of rope, still looped around the base of a bench, still tied in a perfect sailor's knot. Time had eaten the ship, but not the rope, not the bond. Arthur Purring lived to be 86. In his final interview, he was asked what he remembered most from that night. He smiled faintly and said, "The dark didn't win. That's what I remember." Today, a section of that rope rests in the Royal Navy Submarine Museum in Gosport. Labeled simply, "Recovery Rope, HMS Trenchant, 1944. Visitors pass it without much notice, but if you look closely, you can still see the fingerprints pressed into its fibers. They say history remembers the battles and the medals, but sometimes it's the things left behind. A rope, a song, a promise, that carry the true weight of survival. February 1944, 39 hours in darkness. 15 men brought back to the light, and one rope, that still refuses to break, dedicated to all who served beneath the sea.